This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Survivor Series is the WWE's second oldest continuous pay-per-view, or premium live event as it's now billed. But what led to the show's creation? And was it created to put the final nail in the coffin of Jim Crockett Promotions? Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at the story of Survivor Series. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Sitting in the catbird seat. Fresh off the success of 1987's WrestleMania 3, the WWF could do no wrong. The promotion rode the show's momentum to become the #1 wrestling promotion in North America and didn't look back. WrestleMania 3's success gave the WWF more bargaining power with pay-per-view providers, something it would use to deliver a devastating blow to would-be rival Jim Crockett Promotions. Putting its eggs in one basket. Despite the WWF's continued growth and success, it wasn't the only game in town. The American Wrestling Association and Jim Crockett Promotions were still around and looking for the same success as the WWF. Unfortunately, they were far behind the WWF, particularly in the AWA, which seemed to have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. Ironically, Jim Crockett Promotions was dancing on the edge of the abyss more than the AWA. Jim Crockett Promotions took bold steps to become more competitive with the WWF, but these steps exposed the company to financial danger, if not disaster. In 1987, Crockett purchased Bill Watts' Universal Wrestling Federation, a quality product that nonetheless was burning through cash. The problem wasn't the booking. Watts' territory was often considered one of the best booked promotions, but the economy. According to Watts, my strongest cities, the ones that made up my base, were in Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Texas. Their economies were basically supported by the oil industry, but their economies were planned around oil going for at least $20 a barrel. When it reached $8 a barrel in late 1986, it was a major crisis. Refinery jobs and related jobs dried up, and when they went, a lot of the local service and entertainment industries went with them. Watts recalls that at one point, his promotion was losing $50,000 a week. Ticket sales were weak, and the Cowboy had several wrestlers signed to guaranteed contracts, where they were paid a set figure regardless of ticket sales. Jim Crockett Jr. purchased the company, and with it, its roster and TV stations. This expanded JCP's reach in TV markets. Unfortunately, the $4 million purchase was just one example of management's excessive spending. It's been said that you have to spend money to make money, but Crockett's spending was growing to the point where it was more than what he was taking in. Was JCP putting its eggs in one basket, or was this purchase a safe bet? Jim Crockett Promotions felt it had a sure thing to fall back on, its annual Starrcade Supercard. The decision to run its flagship show, Starrcade, on pay-per-view should have taken care of the need for cash. The original Starrcade had shown the feasibility. See our video on the story of Starrcade for more details, of airing shows in multiple markets via closed-circuit TV. Now, 1987 Starrcade would air for the first time on pay-per-view. The decision to air Starrcade on pay-per-view made sense. As Shaun Assael writes in Sex, Lies, and Headlocks, 200 cable systems had signed up to carry Starrcade. If he did anything remotely close to a buy rate of 10% at $19.95 a show, he could buy half of Greensboro with the 8-figure take he expected. Meanwhile, Vince McMahon was poised to capitalize on the success of WrestleMania 3, solidifying his dominance in the pay-per-view market by adding a second show in 1987. Unfortunately for JCP, McMahon's new show would compete against Starrcade, leading to disaster for Crockett. Ruthless aggression, the early years. Vince McMahon's 21st Century edict that his wrestlers show ruthless aggression to break out to the top was based on his own business policies, which led to the WWE monopolizing wrestling. One example was his decision to run a show against Starrcade in 1987. Crockett's Starrcade was a significant revenue source, and McMahon's actions showed he was ready to put a major dent in it. Or was he? Over the last 35-plus years, a consensus is formed that Vince McMahon created Survivor Series to hamstring Starrcade. For example, James Dixon writes in Titan Sinking, Survivor Series was a well-established annual tradition for the WWF. The November Supercard had first launched in 1987 as a direct assault on WCW predecessor Jim Crockett Promotions' biggest show of the year, Starrcade. Vince had been cute about implementing the show, threatening pay-per-view providers that they couldn't have WrestleMania 4 unless they aired Survivor Series and can't Starrcade, the latter of which aired the same day as the WWF's new show. Historian Tim Hornbaker writes about the decision to run Survivor Series against Starrcade in The Death of the Territories. Vince McMahon didn't want to concede anything to his rival and went on the offensive to narrow JCP's chances for success. First, he scheduled a competing pay-per-view show for Thanksgiving, naming it the Survivor Series. Then, he used his leverage as a leader in pro wrestling's pay-per-view field to get cable systems to reject Starrcade entirely, telling executives that if they went ahead and presented the JCP program, they wouldn't get the next WrestleMania. However, longtime WWF writer Bruce Pritchard claims that there was no malice involved in creating Survivor Series. According to Pritchard, Vince McMahon was upset that the pay-per-view companies were seemingly embracing Jim Crockett Promotions with open arms when it was the WWF that had filled pay-per-view outlets' coffers thanks to WrestleMania. It was the cable companies that said, "Then give us an alternative." And that's when Vince says, "Okay, I'll give you a show." It wasn't Vince going out and saying F Crockett. It was like, "If you don't want us to take this, give us something else to put on." And that's when he said, "Okay, we'll give you another event to put on." The idea of two Thanksgiving events appealed to closed-circuit providers, especially if fans chose to watch both shows. The problem is that McMahon didn't provide this option. While McMahon may have requested the WWF be given a chance to air its Thanksgiving show, there's overwhelming evidence that he told providers that they had to choose one show or the other if they wanted to get WrestleMania 4. Ironically, McMahon didn't deliver on his ultimatum to these companies that refused him. According to Dave Meltzer, despite the threats, all 5 companies were allowed to air WrestleMania the next year. Ultimately, the majority of pay-per-view companies opted to run Survivor Series. Tim Hornbaker writes, "Starrcade was only available for pay-per-view in 300,000 households, while McMahon offered the Survivor Series to 7 million homes." As Shaun Assael writes, "It was a bloodbath. Only 5 cable companies out of the original 200 stayed loyal to the Crockett's. Starrcade wound up being bought by just 15,000 homes, leading the company to take in just $80,000 after expenses." McMahon's business acumen and/or ruthlessness guaranteed a bad night for Crockett's Starrcade. But what about the Survivor Series? What made the first show so successful it became an annual tradition? And does JCP bear any responsibility for Starrcade's failure? Teams of 5 strive to survive. McMahon decided to try something different with Survivor Series. The WWF had many strong storylines in 1987, and he would use the new show to further them. Chief among them was the rivalry between WWF champion Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Although Hogan had thrown back Andre's challenge at WrestleMania 3, there was plenty of life left in the program, and the WWF carefully limited the number of times the two interacted on TV. The result was Survivor Series, a type of all-star show for the WWF superstars that only featured tag team matches. The concept was novel and intriguing. No titles were at stake, but fans would get to see the WWF's many talents teaming up to battle each other, often with storylines driving each match. The match began with 2 teams of 5, and the match continued until one team eliminated its opponents by pinfall, submission, countout, or disqualification. The WWF's deep roster was evident by the wrestlers assembled for each elimination match. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat teamed with Jake the Snake Roberts, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Randy Macho Man Savage, and Brutus Beefcake to defeat the Honky Tonk Man, Dangerous Danny Davis, Harley Race, Hercules, and Ron Bass. The WWF also featured a match with its female talent, the Fabulous Moolah, the Jumping Bomb Angels, Itsuki Yamazaki, and Norio Tateno, Rockin' Robin, and Velvet McIntyre defeating Dawn Marie, Donna Christianello, the Glamour Girls, Leilani Kai, and Judy Martin, and Sherry Martel. One of the highlights of the night was a 10-team spectacular featuring many of the promotion's top tag teams. Here, both members of a team were eliminated when one of its members lost. Babyface teams, the British Bulldogs, the Killer Bees, the Fabulous Rougeau Brothers, Strikeforce, and the Young Stallions defeated the Bolsheviks, Demolition, the New Dream Team, the Hart Foundation, and the Islanders. Headlining the show was a 10-man match powered by the Hogan vs. Andre rivalry. The Hulkster selected Paul Orndorff, Bam Bam Bigelow, Ken Patera, and Don Morocco, and they battled Andre's team of Butch Reed, King Kong Bundy, the One Man Gang, and Ravishing Rick Rude. While Hogan's team lost, Bam Bam Bigelow looked fantastic as he wrestled at a 3-1 disadvantage. Bam Bam defeated the one-man gang and Bundy before Andre won the match. True to form, Hulk Hogan attacked Andre after the match, blasting the 8th wonder of the world with the WWF Championship belt while Andre was celebrating. Survivor Series succeeded both critically and commercially. Starrcade, by comparison, floundered, even with JCP's fanbase. Jim Crockett Promotions' decision to run Starrcade in Chicago, hence the name Starrcade Chi-Town Heat, instead of its longtime home in Greensboro, irked his core fans. The main event between NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ron Garvin and Nature Boy Ric Flair was considered weak, mainly because Garvin had never been positioned as a main eventer. The undercard also suffered from questionable booking, including the decision not to have hometown heroes, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, defeat the Four Horsemen's Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. The Roadies appeared to have won after a ref bump led to a second referee making the 3 count, but the original referee overturned the decision, ruling Animal had been disqualified for throwing Arn over the top rope. Survivor Series Legacy. The Survivor Series' initial success led to it becoming an annual tradition, as the WWF initially continued its lineup of elimination matches. In 1991, the WWF changed the format, continuing its elimination matches, but adding one-on-one matches. The show also changed its format when the WWF held a tournament to crown a new WWF champion at 1998's show. Over time, Survivor Series has focused on contests between WWE's different brands. Unfortunately, the traditional elimination matches have disappeared, and WWE has instead focused on traditional matches and its version of War Games. So, do you remember the first Survivor Series? Did you watch it, or even attend it? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and let us know if there are any other videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.